In this lesson for BobCAD-CAM, we're going to take a look at the lathe toolpathing portion of the software. I'm going to open a file, the Getting Started CAD file. And what we're going to do on this is I'm going to go ahead and turn off the text on the end of this. And we're going to actually just turn in this. We're going to face the end of it, turn the outside, put the grooves in, drill the center hole, and cut off the back side of the part. Some of your basic lathe operations. So in a top view, you can see I'm looking down at the top of the part. What we want is we want the part sitting in the top view so where we can see the side profile of it. So let's go to an isometric 2 view. We're going to go to Utilities and Rotate. We're going to rotate this around the Y 90 degrees around the center of the screen. I'm going to choose the part and OK it. And if the preview looks good, we'll OK that and cancel the feature. So if I go back to a top view, you can see I'm looking at the profile of the part. You also want to orientate the part to grid 0 as it would be the lathe machine 0, because on the lathe portion of the software, the grid 0 is your machine part 0 for X, Y, and X and Z 0. So we're going to shift this over the height of this boss, which is 1.5 inches. We're going to use Utilities and Translate. We're going to go over minus 1.5, pick the part and OK it, and shift it over. Now what we want for the tool pathing is we want the profile, or the wireframe lines and arcs profile of the part to tool path off of. So to do this, it's very easy. This procedure will work for any solid that you create or bring in the BobCAD for pulling the profile off in lines and arcs. We're not going to use the extract edges feature because that will just give us the rings of the surfaces where we want an actual slice through the model. For this, I'm going to right click in layers and add a new layer, and I'm going to call this wireframe profile for now. I'm going to put the check on that layer, so that's the active layer. Then I'm going to go to Other and Rectangle and choose Sketch, and sketch a rectangle any size larger than the part. I'm going to go to Surfaces and Planar. I'm going to choose that, OK it, and if the preview looks good, OK that to create the plane through my model. As I roll it around, you'll see I just sliced right through the model. Now we're going to go to Surfaces and Intersection of Curves. We're going to choose the surface and the model and cancel the feature. If I turn off the main solid layer, turn on selection mode, I can start deleting what I don't want. And you can see that gave me a cut right through the model of the intersection of the two. The bottom half I do not need, so I'll delete that out, and you can see I have just my profile of my part. Now we're going to make some changes to this because these slots here are a milling operation that we're not going to do in the lathe. So we want to square this off here. So if I fit my screen, I'm going to try and grab this area here and delete it. And I could do a trim and extend, or I'm just going to remove that piece out there since it's the same place, and do a trim and extend 2 entities, this one up to here. Now at the same time, I want to close this off across here because when I turn this, I don't want the tool to dive into here. So to do that, you can do your trim and extends across there. But again, I'm just going to pull one of these out since it's the same level. And then Utilities, trim and extend 2 entities, and close this back off. So that way I have a solid piece all the way across the one side there. Now I'm also going to get rid of this shape in here. We don't need that. And I'll close off the back side one more time. Trim and extend 2 entities from here to here. There's one more thing I'm going to do. I need something to be able to drill off of. So I'm going to go to Point and Coordinate and just place a point at 0, 0, 0. That way I can choose the point for my drill. At this point, we're going to go to Modules and New CAM Job. We're going to choose Turning, choose the lathe machine that you want to use, and then go into your stock wizard. We're going to use cylindrical stock. My stock diameter is 6 1/4, and there's no internal diameter, no hole through it. We're going to say we're going to drill that, and my length will say is 5 inches. And I'm going to put 100 thousandths on the end of it for facing. If you don't put stock here, the facing toolpath won't work. It has to have something to cut off. We'll hit the next button. You have your default clearances. I'm going to leave those alone and press OK. Now back in my CAM tree, I don't want to look at my stock this whole time, so I'm going to right click on it and blank it out. So if I need to see it again, I can re-click on the blank there. So the first thing we're going to do is face the end of the part. So to do this, we're going to right click on Machine Setup. We're going to do Lathe Turning. Select our geometry. We're going to pick the end, just the one straight piece, and OK it. Hit next. Stock parameters, we're going to leave those alone. And we're going to pick our strategy. We're going to do a face. We're not only going to do a rough, I'm going to add in a face basic finish. So I have a face rough and a face basic finish. If you want to do a spring pass or another finish, just keep adding those to the tree. You can move them up and down and take them out here. So if I can bring in another one if I wanted, if I don't want it, I can take it out. Separate moves or machine can cycles will apply to the entire operation list. Now we're on to the tool for the roughing. So you have your orientation number. For facing, 5 works from outside to center of part, and 8 would be from center up. We'll stay on 5. So you can go through here and set your tool sizes by typing them in, or you can go through your tool crib and into your library and pick from there as well. For this one, we're just going to type in some tool sizes here. We'll use a diamond insert. We're going to say it's an 031 corner radius, and it's a 55 degree, 24 degree. IC would be this green size here. Tool numbering, spindle direction, coolant options. You have RPM or constant surface speed, and your speeds and feeds here. Tool label, we're going to call this we'll just call it diamond rough for now. Name this whatever you want so it comes up however you reference your tools and everybody can understand what that tool is. We'll just save time with that. Depth of cut, we're only taking 100, so we'll rough it in 30 thou steps. We'll leave this will be fine for the stock for finishing. Compensations, you have system and machine. With system, you get 3 options. You have off, which is just theoretical point programming. On with collision detection does tool nose radius comp, and as the picture shows, it will also do collision detection on the back side of the tool. This will also, just to let you know, increase cycle times and modify the tool path to adjust to keep that tool from hitting. This is recommended to be used only when you think the backside of the tool is going to hit. So for like on facing on the end of the part where the backside of the tool isn't going to hit, what I'll use for that one is on without collision detection. And this one will do tool nose radius comp for me automatically, but it's not going to take the time and the calculation power to check to make sure the backside of the tool isn't going to hit. We know it's not going to hit anything. Machine compensation, you have left, right, and off, so we're going to turn that on as well so we can have adjustment there if we needed to tweak it in. Rapids, it'll give you the correct rapid on default, but you can change these if you wanted to, and you can also change your initial home position there. Lead in and outs, now normally you would just put little amounts in here or leave it at 0, but for this particular instance we're actually going to use our lead in and out to cut the entire stock. Right now we just chose this little area here, but our stock actually extends all the way up and all the way down, and we need to cut that. So on the lead in and the X, I'm going to add 2.5 to it, the distance from this point up to clear my stock. Coming down from here to here is actually 375 in the minus direction, but I'm going to go minus 0.4. The reason why is the radius of the tool. If you were to stop right there, it would leave that little radius stand up right there, that if you want to cut that off, you need to actually come down past it a little bit. And actually, before I move on, we're actually going to be setting our leads on the finish pass as well down here. And you have this button in here a lot of people aren't aware of, which is apply to all operations. So it sees any leads page that are in any of the other operations, and if I click this, it will take these settings and set all the other leads pages to those settings. So that's a nice feature. When we get to it, you'll see that it'll already be set and we won't have to change it. So now we're on to the finish pass tool. We can use the same one. We could go in and pick a different one out of the library. This one we'll just type in a different one here. Maybe we'll leave that corner radius, make it a 35 degree, and we'll call this finish diamond. You can put a size in there, whatever you want it to be. Tool 2, speeds and feeds, orientation 5. We're going to finish it so it's 0. On without collision detection, and we'll turn on the comp for the machine. Rapids are the same, and leads you can see by me of hitting that apply to all operations button, I now have those preset and I can compute it. We got our toolpath over here. In the tree I can right click on each operation and change the color so we can see them better. We'll make the roughing orange, and we'll make the color of the finishing a green. And you can see it cut my entire stock. Now we're going to rough and turn the outside of this. We're going to go back to machine setup, do turning. I'm going to pick the outside of this. You can chain select it, whatever method you want. Stock parameters. We're going to do a turn rough, and we're going to add in a turn basic finish. This works just like we looked at in the last feature. Separate moves or CAM cycles. Now for the tool, we could go back in and pick our same tool we used before. Let's see here if we go in. Yeah, we'll pick the same tool, one we had before, and load that one back in, and we'll call this rough turn diamond. You make it the same name, same tool. You can see it loaded in all the same settings, tool 1 and so forth. Now on the orientation for turning, the way this works is 1 and 2 is OD cutting and 3 and 4 is ID cutting. So as you can see, 1 would be cutting on the OD from right to left. 2 would be cutting on the OD from left to right, like cutting back into a shoulder. And then on the inside, 4 would be on the inside, right to left, and 3 would be the same thing as the other one on the inside, cutting back into a shoulder. So very important to get the correct orientation. We're going to use orientation 1. Depth of cut, we'll step down 60 thousandths of cut. We'll leave some material for finishing, and we're going to run on without collision detection and on comp on machine. We'll use the default rapid type, and lead in and outs will leave 0. The finish tool, for this one, we're going to use orientation 1. We'll make this let's just make it a 55 degree, 24 with a smaller tool radius. And I'll just call this finish diamond turn. This will be tool 3. Set up your speeds and feeds. No allowance for finishing, on without collision detection. So it's just going to do the tool nose radius. And I'm going to use machine comp so I can have adjustment at the machine. We'll use the default rapids type, and again 0 for the leads. We'll compute it. So very easy to go through. Again, I'm going to make the roughing color orange and the finishing color green. So you can see the finish is just the one pass. Now if I wanted the tool to, on this particular operation here, to start out here and come in just a little bit before it goes up, if I go back to the feature and edit it and go to the leads, that would be the Z on the end. Let's just put an 1/8 inch in there. And I'm going to apply that to all operations so it carries down to the finish and recompute it. So you can see it just added that little extra distance to it for me on both the rough and the finish. Now we need to do our grooves. And to do this, we're going to go back to the CAM tree, right click on machine setup. We're going to do lathe turning again. We're going to do just the first groove. You can only do one groove per feature. So we'll start with the first one. Next, stock parameters. We're going to do a turning groove, rough and finish. Separate moves. For the tool, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch corner radius, 1/4 inch. Oop, look at that. It'll tell you if you type something in there wrong. So I'm just going to type that in again. So you can see I'm just doing a 1/4 inch ball cutoff tool, or full rounded cutoff tool. And we'll call this rough groove quarter. Tool 4, speeds and feeds, everything we looked like before. Orientation numbers works the same way as the turning, except it's theoretical point. One is on one side, one is on the other, or 2 is on the other. Step over, we'll do like 30 thou. Allowances for the finish pass. You can add pecking amounts into here if you need. And notice when I click on the different boxes, the visuals will update to help you set the different settings. On with collision detection or off. And you can also use machine comp. We're going to leave that off also. Default rapids, leads, these all work the same as we saw before. Into the finishing. So for this one, we're going to use the 125 1/4 inch tool. And we're going to say finish groove quarter. Speeds and feeds, spindle directions, orientation 1 still. No material for finish for allowance. We're going to finish this, and we'll use the same compensations. We'll use the same default rapid, and we'll use the same leads. So we'll compute it. So what we're going to do is change the color of the rough and the finish. So now what we want to do is we have 3 options for doing the rest of these. The first one is to simply redo it again in the tree, but that's a lot of settings and going through. Option 2 is if you know these settings for this grooving operation is something you're going to use in another file or consistently in a lot of files, you could right click on the feature, go down and save the feature, give it a name, like I'm going to call this Groove 1, and that's stored into my software, so I can use it in a new file down the road or even in this one. So now when I go to use it, instead of picking it up here, I'm going to load the feature, pick the Groove 1, and you can see it puts it in my tree. So all I have to do is pick the next geometry and then compute it. And it'll have all the same parameters for me. You can even see it has the colors saved the same. So it saves you from having to go through all those steps. Now there's a third option, and this is for if you don't want to store it. You want to put it in the tree again in this file, but you don't want to store it in the software for future use. It's the only time you're going to probably use those settings. And that is to right click on it and copy it. And then just go to where you want it and right click and paste it. Then you can pick your geometry and then right click and compute it. And you can see it'll give you the same result as well. So whether you do a whole nother feature in the tree, load and save it for storage, or copy and paste it, you can do that in the software. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is drill our hole down the center. So we're going to go to Machine Setup. We're going to do a hole. We're going to pick the point that we created. Next. You have your rapid plane, our depth. We'll say 4 inches will get us through the whole part. Feed plane, rapid plane. Now this is initial value, and this is your retract amount when you're talking drilling, because it's going to use your drilling CAN cycles. And our diameter we're going to make 750, 3/4 inch. We're going to use the hole option, and we're going to use a center drill and a drill. Again, you can move these back and forth as needed. We're going to use CAN cycles. Now for the center drill, you can come into here. As you can see, I can go into my library and pick from all of my center drills. So maybe I want to use a 1/2 inch 90-degree spot drill. Load that one in. And I can also assign a tool holder, like a drill chuck, for simulation purposes. I also want to make sure my protrusion length is long enough to hang out the end of it. So 2 inches on a spot will be fine. Speeds and feeds are the same as we've worked with. Now on the depth of this, I'm going to define it by 100 thousandths off the tip. You can also define it by diameter or center angle. Rapids, I'm going to use the default rapid. Now we're on to the drill. You can see it gave me the correct drill. Make sure your tip angle is correct. You can change it by unchecking this. And I'll also assign a holder to this one as well. Tool numbering and speeds and feeds. Protrusion length. You can use the default cutting conditions in the software, or you can uncheck this and it won't look at the cutting conditions on peck amounts and so forth. You can do a single depth, peck with retract, or dwell. We're going to peck with retract, and I'll just leave the defaults for this, or you can override them. And the default rapids, and we'll compute it, and it'll give me my drill down the center. Alright, so the last thing we really have to do on this is just cut off the back side of this. So we're going to go to Machine Setup. We're going to do a Lathe Cutoff. I'm going to pick a point right here. You can have it at 0, the top, or wherever you want. Stock parameters. Cutoff is the only option we have. Separate moves and machine CAN cycles. Now the tool for this, you can choose your different types of tools that you want. This is a particular cutoff tool. We'll just leave the default one for this. I'll just give it a label and just call it cutoff tool. tool numbering, speeds and feeds. Now, this is looking for the position in X and Z. You can see it gave me the distance over to here from 0. And what this is meaning is it's just going to come down to within 375 of 0. Well, if we've already drilled this hole, I don't have to come all the way down, but I need to come into that sum. So I'm going to reduce this number down to 250. So that's going to bring the tool to within 250 of the center. You can do peck amounts. You can do corner break types where you can do square, chamfer it, or fillet it with the same tool. And then your compensations, as well as your rapids. We'll use the default, and we'll compute it. So you can see there's my cutoff. And see how it came past it some? I don't have to come because I've already drilled it out. If I didn't, I'd want to come down just past the center on that. So this part is done. If you wanted to post code for this, you would come up to the top, make sure you have the right machine and post. If you need to change the post, just right click on it and edit and choose a different post. And then come up to the turning job, right click and hit post for the code. Here you can see this is the code for our operation. From here you can either right click and save it directly out of the software or send it to the editor for hand edits and communications. For simulation, just go to modules and choose the lathe simulation option. This will take just a moment to open up. Once inside of here, I'm going to turn off the initial stock, the toolpath, and the part itself. So I'm just looking at my stock and my tool. Speed controls. You have a fit screen. I want to put it in a, that view right there is pretty good. We'll just refit the screen, make it a little bigger, and we'll hit play. Just let it run through. So you can see it's doing the facing, the turning, on down the cone, the facing finish and turning finish, the groovings, the roughing and the finish, and the drill. We have a spot, our drill coming in the end, and then the cutoff on the back side. And there's your finished part. Hit the X to close it down. This concludes this lesson.